Okay, what's up? This is the first edition of the Monday Matinee here on the channel. I'm Jake.
Hi, I'm Ariana Joy.
So this is pretty exciting. We are both kind of getting into the movie space a bit, and it's been really fun to start to dive into a little bit more different types of films. And I'm pretty excited to kind of bring you this weekly series or video series of different movie reviews. And with Dune 2 coming out this Thursday, we decided to rewatch Dune number 1. It's a rewatch for me. I think, was this the first full-time watch for you?
Yeah, this is a 1.5. I did end up falling asleep the first time around, so this one I did actually get through it all, which I think I have a little bit more of an appreciation now that I know the lore, I guess.
Yeah, I was a huge fan of this movie from the first viewing. I hadn't read the book. We have a couple books right there. Great novel from Frank Herbert. And after seeing the first movie, I went and finished the book. I hadn't read it before watching it, but I did know a little bit from my brother. He kind of introduced me to some of the background and the lore so that going into the movie, I would know kind of a little bit what's going to happen, what's going on in the universe. Because if you haven't seen this movie, first off, spoiler warning, because we're going to talk about some of the plot and how the movie sets up for Dune Part II, but I feel like it was definitely helpful for me going in knowing a little bit about the families and the different houses that were going to be huge players. Was that something you think was important?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, going into it, I had literally no idea. And most of the time, I didn't really see that as a problem because I wasn't looking for it, if that makes sense, which I think is the biggest difference between the people who read the book and people who just go in and watch the movie. And I think that goes with a lot of different movies that are adaptations of books. Most of the time you don't get in all of those little details, which if you haven't read the book is not a huge deal because you don't actually notice them. But for people like you, I was noticing when we were watching the movie, you had to explain certain things to me. There were certain little attributes that at least the movie did do, which were kind of little tidbits for readers who know what's going on in the universe. But for me, it just seemed like a cool part of that universe.
Right. Yeah, almost like a visual tell of something that's eventually coming, like all of Paul's visions. It's kind of, when you go into it blind, it's kind of like, oh, these are conflicting a little bit. Is this actually what's going to happen in the future? Or kind of what you see at the end of the movie with Jameis, it's not exactly what you initially think, where they're saying follow the friend, and you think initially based on what we're seeing in the film, Jameis is that person, but then in the end he ends up taking him down in the duel and following the tribe of Fremen. So I definitely think if you go into this movie blind and you don't know anything about the universe, it might be worth a rewatch after once you've seen it, just so that you can go back and catch some of those details that you might not have caught on. Also, the vernacular in this film and all the different terminology of the Dune universe is very how do I want to put this? It's difficult to understand because of the in-universe verbiage that they use. That some of the words, they let you know what it means exactly. Some of them, I think they're maybe holding back for the second movie. But then there were times where a term is used that's in universe that we're not really explained at all what it is, and you kind of just have to go along for the ride, which makes it tough to understand.
Yeah, that's something that I totally noticed, especially towards the beginning of the movie. I feel like they definitely wanted to have this sense of mystery, so they didn't tell us what a lot of the languages that they were talking about, what the words meant, and specifically his mother had a lot of different words for certain things. Specifically about her witchery, which is what they kind of explain it in the movie, which is probably not how they explain it in the book because it's way too much information for the movie to explain. But I think without having that mystery at the beginning, it definitely doesn't hold up for what's going on at the end, because I feel like the pacing of the movie in general is very, very slow in the beginning, and then the moment if you're still don't know about his father dying, his father dies in this first movie.
Rip Duke Leto.
Yeah, but
around halfway through.
Yeah, so
Great scene though.
I definitely think once the Duke dies, the pacing of the entire movie shifts and it gets a lot more fast. And the moment, like, I don't know, the city, the empire, the world gets like burned, I feel like everything around them is just so much more fast, which is kind of crazy because I feel like there's so much more locations in the second half of the movie than in the first half of the movie. So it's a little bit hard to like keep up where in the world they are. But I guess that it doesn't really matter as much because the first half of the movie is just building the characters, which is so important, especially with like Paul, because he's obviously the main character.
Yep.
And at least what I was getting from this movie was that Paul is very much like an unreliable person because he has no idea what's actually going on and he has no idea why he's so important.
Yeah, he feels like he's a piece in a bigger puzzle that he's not quite yet aware of how important he is to the final story. So I guess with this discussion, we can kind of just dive into the plot and kind of the story development, what we liked, what we didn't like. For me, one of the first things that on a rewatch, I really like the way they weave it in is just kind of this motif of like heat and fire and how dangerous it is. Like the scene with the Gom Jabbar where Paul has to put his hand in the box and she holds the Gom Jabbar to his neck.
Yeah.
It's described, from what I remember in the book, it's been a little bit since I've finished it, but it's described in the book as almost like a burning sensation on his hand. And I think they do a really cool job of visually showing that in the film where there's quick cuts of flames or the trees, the sacred trees in Arrakis on fire. And then there's even a cut of a hand that's like regular, and then maybe a couple seconds later it's like a charcoal like burned hand. It's a good way of like symbolically showing the audience what Paul is going through in that moment, instead of just having like Timothée Chalamet scream, it burns. Like that wouldn't have been as visually interesting, which I think was really cool. And also obviously with the Harkonnens later on when they attack, they set the city Iraqi ablaze. Like that theme of fire and destruction throughout is really interesting to me, especially because of how important like water is on Arrakis. The way that flames and heat are used as destruction and water is seen as like the way of life is really interesting to me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like there's so many different like visual parts of the story that kind of guide you throughout. And I guess without all of that like visual interaction between like even the visions that he has, it's by he I mean Paul. Like I don't think that the story would make as much sense if they didn't kind of visually explain what he was feeling within his visions. And I feel like also within his visions, I thought it was pretty cool that it all kind of resonated within the same like genre and they all had the same kind of theme throughout, even though they weren't all about the same person. But I thought it was pretty cool that they were able to weave that in. And I think anything that has to do with visions or dreams or anything like that is really hard to convey.
Definitely.
Especially like movies like that, because I mean, they've done it in so many different other films and it just never works out. So.
Right. And I think also, even if you think back to Caladan, where the Atreides, their home planet, it's a planet that's really built on like water and there's bodies of water and oceans and everything. Kind of shows where they're coming from and how, like I said, water on Arrakis is seen as like pure and life-giving. It's really interesting the way that the Atreides come to Arrakis as people who are from a planet that's filled with water. And I know later in the book, again, spoilers for potentially Dune 2. It's not out yet, but I'm sure they're going to get into a lot of this. Paul explains to a lot of the people in that Fremen tribe, and especially Chani, how the planet he's from has huge
so
bodies
much
of water.
Yeah.
And she's like, I mean, I can't
even imagine
like, the way we wear still suits and we have to drink recycled water, and the fact that you guys came here from a planet that water is bountiful. It's really interesting, that kind of competition between fire and water, I think, in this movie. Obviously, it's about the Harkonnens and the Atreides, but also kind of what each side is representing in the conflict, which I
Yeah,
think is good.
I feel like it's really cool to see like all the different I don't know, species of
Mhm.
people in this movie, because even like the Harkonnens, you can tell who they are based on the clothes they wear and the appearance they have.
Yeah, they all got those bald heads.
Yeah, I was doing a little bit of research because that's not something that they really explained in the movie at all.
Mhm.
But really, the reason why they look like that is because the planet that they come from has no vegetation, has no sunlight, and so that's why they're colorless and they almost look like pale and almost clear.
Right.
So that's why they have no hair and they have no like. They basically are just like blobs of people, which I kind of thought was funny because when the what was his name? The leader was
The Baron or
yeah, the Baron.
Batista or the other
No, the Baron.
the Baron Harkonnen, yeah.
Yeah, then they like threw him into the little like pond of blackness.
Yeah, the goo, I
The
think is what
goo.
you called it.
I literally, it reminded me of in Harry Potter when Voldemort gets dumped into the boiling water and then he like rises up.
Mm.
And I just thought that was funny. But I can definitely tell like color is a very important part of the film.
Oh yeah,
Which,
that's in all of Denis Villeneuve's films. Like we recently just watched Blade Runner, both the original one and 2049. And if you guys want us to review that on the Monday matinee, definitely let us know. But even in 2049, which is by the same director, color was huge in that movie, and all those different scenes with like the oranges and the blues,
yeah,
the neon lighting.
I completely agree. Even like down to what certain characters wear. Like Jessica, I noticed this after maybe 5-10 minutes into the film. She only wears really bright and opaque colors. And I feel like that really just symbolizes that she's on a whole other level compared to all the other characters. And then all the warriors wear like lighter and like navy blue and stuff like that. And then obviously the Harkonnen just wear gray.
Yeah.
Just be there, I guess. And I just find that cool when certain aspects of movies go down to such little details, and then you can kind of see the evolution of the characters change even within the costume design that they have, because even like when they transition and they have to go into the like suits,
The still suits.
the still suits, like the entire vibe that happens within that change, because you can even like even in the very beginning, the one of the first lines that Paul has is what kind of attire should I wear to the ceremony, and he's like military or casual or whatever, and his father's like, oh, of course you're wearing your military like attire, that's what you're supposed to wear. But you don't even see him wear it for the rest of the film after that, so it's a little bit, I think it's really cool when small details like that happens and you can really see a shift in the characters as they change through their costumes.
Yeah. Something else it's pretty easy to notice while you watch it is, so the Fremen are the native people of the planet Arrakis, and in the film it's really interesting, the casting. Pretty much all of the Atreides that they show and that have lines and that are big time players, other than through Fear Hawat, but they're pretty much all white people, and a lot of the Harkonnens that are cast are also by white actors. But then you look at a lot of the people from Arrakis. You've got Chani or Zendaya. You've got Jameis. You've got a bunch of different minority groups represented, which I think was definitely on purpose by the casting directors, because the Fremen are a group of people on the planet that are kind of how would you describe, like
they've just definitely been oppressed for most of their life.
That's probably the best way to say it.
Yeah.
They even say it in the opening monologue from Chani, who kind of narrates the beginning, kind of the introduction to the universe. She says, why has the Emperor done this, implying about the Harkonnens leaving, and then she says, who will our next oppressors be? I thought that was really interesting, kind of symbolism or a commentary on society as a whole, because it's almost like these people from Arrakis represent good qualities and like very valuable things, but these other groups kind of just come in and take it and give nothing in return. I feel like that was really an interesting way to weave that important symbolism and storytelling into a movie about science fiction and shooting laser guns and
No,
stuff.
I think it's really cool when you kind of weave in real, because what makes worlds like that, like fictional worlds like that, work is having these conflicts that we have in our daily life, because we see like stuff like this on the news all the time. And so I feel like because we see it in our daily life, it's definitely something that can be believable, because all of the people on Arrakis and all the people in this universe are descendants of us. That's essentially what I got, at least when it was, because I feel like it wouldn't be placed in such a far away future if it wasn't
right.
supposed to be.
In the beginning, it says like Earth in like the year 10,000. So this is set far in the future where so many things are different. Space travel is commonplace because of the spice available on Arrakis. Interesting that aliens are not really a factor at that point, which a lot of science fiction, I feel like they really rely on
like
alien
other
life form.
like other natives. I guess Arrakis would be considered aliens, but they're not really.
They're all basically humans. I mean, the
exactly.
Fremen, especially the Doctor Liet Kynes, she really refers to the Atreides people as humans, and the desert isn't kind to human life. So I think they kind of separate themselves from those people who come, and they call them off-worlders, which kind of indicates what people are going to have success among the sandworms and the desert life versus, getting swallowed up whole by a worm in the sand, which is pretty amazing stuff. And I think we can kind of, unless you have some more points to talk about, we can kind of move into the digital design and the CGI of this movie. Absolutely incredible. Whether it was the invasion scene of the Harkonnens when they attack the main city, whether it was the giant sandworms and how realistic those looked. And I'm assuming that most of the stuff in the desert was not filmed on site, especially the worms and the ways that they move the sand around and when they make those huge dives into the sand and the huge explosions of the sand going flying. That must have all been done somehow in post-production. And it was so well done that it didn't take me out of the movie at all.
No, I really agree with that. Sometimes CGI in general or like motion effects, it just doesn't really work. But I feel like a big part of that too is because everything around it was believable and we were really set in the place that it was being shot in. I don't think without like the surroundings looking believable, everything that was up close and detailed also wouldn't be believable, which is why like even the little details of when they were not on Arrakis yet and they were on the home country or the home planet, even the water looked believable. It looked like they were on a remote island, and that's kind of the vibe, kind of like an oasis, if you will. And then they moved to Arrakis and everything looks completely different, but it didn't look like it was fake. It didn't look like it was just props.
Yeah.
Same thing with like the city buildings. They didn't look like there was just a bunch of towers in the middle of the desert, and it looked like it was meant to be there and there was a purpose to them. Same thing with like their suits. You wouldn't expect the suits to be perfectly cleaned. Same thing with like the people there. They weren't all perfectly clean. They still had like dust and dirt all over them. And that's something that the little details all add up to the motion effects and how they all look. Because without the little details, everything else looks like crap.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there are so many movies nowadays that overuse CGI, and you see these massive budgets for films that ultimately end up failing. And I mean, we're just left wondering, where did this budget go? Like, what did this money actually go toward? But in this movie, I feel like it's a good example of what high budget cinematography should look like. I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm sure it was in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And you could see where every dollar went into this movie, whether it was in the performances, in the set design, in the CGI. Like, everything was so on point with this movie.
Yeah, it was 165 million US dollars put into this movie, and it took about 8 years just of putting it all together, which is, I mean, a lot of work, obviously, but I think for the effects that they chose to do this. Another thing, though, I noticed is they didn't use very much big effects. So really, the only scenes that I can think of that had big effects were the whole like battle scene when there was the initial explosion showing that they like got into the walls, and then the pan up with all of the explosions happening then. So really there wasn't a lot of like big CGI effects that included like big explosions, whereas I feel like a lot of other movies, specifically like
a big Marvel fight.
Yeah,
something
basically something like that. I feel like a good use of effect is not used every other scene, which I feel like this movie does a really good point of showing that this is a crucial part of the movie. This is why we're using this effect here. Like, I feel like showing an effect in every other frame is not going to help the overall experience of the movie, just because it's a cool thing to look at, and no matter how well done it is, it does matter the time and the placement of the effects.
Especially because Dune Part I is not a science fiction movie based on fights and action the same way that, you know, a modern day Star Wars would be, where you're getting a lightsaber fight every 20 minutes and someone shooting a blaster every 5 minutes, or jokes every 20 seconds. This is a movie that was very character based and very, you know, heavy on your mind and making you think about the universe itself and how is everything going to work out with Paul and what does his future look like? How is he going to accept that? And I kind of want to go into the performances real quick, because I think it can be misunderstood by people who don't know about the character Paul Atreides or haven't read the book, because in the book he's known for being kind of cold and almost emotionless. And if you don't know that about the character, it could be very easy to judge Timothée Chalamet's performance as kind of lifeless and just, you know, not full of emotion. Like, you think the most emotional moment in the movie was when he realized that his father was dead, and he kind of just was
freaking out.
Yeah, but he wasn't. You would think that would be a moment in Hollywood that they would say, all right, Timothy, like, this is where we need your most emotional performance. We need tears. We need just distraught. He kind of just leaned down. You could see him crying, but the character Paul Atreides is, you see it go through. Like, he's still reserved, still in control.
Yeah.
And I think that lends itself to him being a really good performer in this movie.
Yeah, I agree. I think my favorite scene from Timothy from this movie was when his mom and him were inside of the tent, and he basically was like getting really upset because ultimately it's his mother's fault for choosing this life for him, and him seeing all these visions, him being the person he is, he's kind of realizing that and realizing how important it is. And I think right then and there's supposed to be like this symbolism of like a shift in his personality and realizing, oh shit, I am the next heir.
Yeah.
And
that's a lot of pressure, you think. Not only is he the next heir, but he very well is on the path of being that Kwisatz Haderach, of being the Lisan Al Gaib they keep saying. Like, that's so much pressure and like a lot to take in when Paul is, I think in the movie he's like 15 years old or something.
That's what I saw when they never explicitly say it in the movie, but Paul is supposed to be like 15 years old. He's supposed to have no idea what he's doing. And basically his parents are like finally accepting him as someone who's supposed to have all these responsibilities.
Yeah, and it's one of those examples is when Duke Leto, who is played by Oscar Isaac, he tells Paul, you're going to sit in on my meetings now and learn what I do, and you're going to try to become the next heir of the Atreides house.
Yeah.
And you see Timothée Chalamet shy away from that, and he kind of looks unsure about himself until that moment of Oscar Isaac as Duke Leto kind of saying, you know, regardless of your choice, you'll always be everything that I wanted you to be in my son. That was one of my favorite scenes.
I love that scene. I feel like this is one of the weirdest films where the stereotype of like a prince who's been neglected by his family is not the theme of the movie. I feel like movies like this really hammer that theme where basically this kid has to figure it out on his own. But this is one of the few films where both of his parents are very supportive of him, which I think is really cool and kind of shows that, like, as long as, like, family really is everything, and really as long as you have that backing and hope, you can do anything. Because I feel like even the father dying was so symbolic of, like, he was willing to do anything to make sure that his family was okay. And I don't know, it just felt like it was kind of refreshing to see a perspective of good people doing good things and actually seeing an outcome of that. Because I feel like movies like this usually make the parents as bad guys.
Some other standout performances. I thought that Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho, I thought his relationship with Timothée Chalamet's character was awesome. You could tell even without any, they had very few scenes of them just kind of shooting the shit and like being friends. You could tell just based on their chemistry that, oh, these two characters, like Paul grew up idolizing Duncan Idaho and his ability to be so strong in the face of battle. And, you know, in the beginning, he's like, Duncan, like, let me go with you because I'm worried about you. I had a dream where you end up dying, which is very important in the movie because that is what ends up happening. So that's kind of an early sign that Paul has that sight. But you could tell, like, Jason Momoa, I feel like he kind of gets underrated as an actor a little bit just because, you know, he's Aquaman. He's just kind of this buff guy.
He's very typecasted into like just being the warrior, and he doesn't really have the ability to just show good acting. Yeah. Because he's meant to do fight scenes, and he does fight scenes really good.
Oh yeah, he's probably got the best fight scenes in this entire movie.
I agree.
With the way he takes on the Sardaukar when they're in that Fremen hideout. But another guy that I think, at least he used to at the time of this movie, get typecasted into either like comedy roles or just some lower level roles was Dave Bautista when he went and he played
I really
Robin
liked his
in this movie. Like, he's very aggressive and angry in this film, and he is awesome in that role.
I
like
really
when he
liked
goes
his role.
That you didn't like the scene. It's very violent, but when they lined up all the Atreides prisoners like that, that was a perfect scene for that character.
I feel like it really showed how brutal the Harkin could be. Like, I don't know, I just feel like that really showed how bad it could get and how much and how important that character was, because I feel like that really was the connection between, because we never really see the Baron like actually do anything like bloody and
other
horrific
than, and the doctor, Dr. Yue, R.I.P. He did not deserve to die like that.
No, that was really sad. But I feel like that Dave Bautista's character really showed how bad it could get with this group of people. And so I feel like without him showing how bad it could be, we wouldn't really understand. And it would just be like a bunch of people killing a bunch of other people and whatever.
Right.
But to see like basically the war crimes that they were committing and not caring about, that's how bad it could get. One of my favorite scenes is when they're getting ready for battle and I didn't even notice it until you said it, but they were like spreading blood all over themselves, and that was like the ritual.
Well, that was the Sardaukar who was working with the Harkonnen army. They were from the
Empire,
the Empire.
But like something like that, like I didn't even notice it until you said it, and then like maybe a few like seconds later, I just saw like a bunch of massive, like basically piles of people getting like their blood drawn. But
brutal stuff.
That was crazy, and I feel like it was very insightful but not gruesome, to the point where like I am like very sensitive about that kind of stuff, but I still, for the most part, was able to actually watch the entire film, and I feel like stuff like that was very intentional. I also think it was very cool how they separated bad killing and like gruesome killing from the good ritual parts of what like the native people do.
Yeah, at the end with Paul and
James. Like that was definitely like, I would kind of categorize that in the same way that like Black Panther did their rituals and stuff like that. It definitely seemed more symbolic of accepting Paul and his mother into the tribe. It wasn't as gruesome, and you can kind of tell based on the attributes that the people were doing and the scenes that they were conveying.
All right. Well, last thing I want to talk about is one of my favorite things in all of film, and that's the music and sound design for Dune Part I. I think that music and sound is by far the most important thing in a film. And just like the other Denis film that we recently watched in Blade Runner 2049, this movie has some awesome music and sound design, whether it's when you're on the planet with the Sardaukar, like that scene you mentioned where they're preparing for battle and they've got like those throat singers putting out that eerie kind of like aggressive sounding music, whether it's the sound design of the shield. I think that sounded pretty awesome. That was a very unique sound effect that really made this film pop for me.
Yeah, I agree. Even down to like the music that they used to symbolize like the native people that lived on the, I keep wanting to say island, but it's a planet. The native people that live on the planet, like they decided to use very strategic music to explain certain roles. Obviously, they didn't use like traditional music. I feel like most of the music that I heard was very similar to like Arabic music and the way that like Muslim Islamic religious music is very similar. And I feel like they do that intentionally to show that these people have traditions and have very specific ways of living and they're not willing to change it. I feel like every time that there was a breathing moment, they used that music to show kind of the progression of where they're going to go and why it's important that they're going towards the native people rather than staying with their kind, I guess you could say. Because more and more so throughout the film, you don't really hear the music from the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, and I mean, I knew the sound design was going to be great from the first few seconds of the film when you hear that boom.
Oh, yeah.
Boom. It's, if you're new to the film, you don't know what that is from the beginning. But then once you start to see the universe, you realize that was the sound of the thumper going from the beginning of the movie. And even something as simple as that, just a sound of, a thump isn't significant, but for this movie it is because of the way it impacts and attracts the sandworms and the way that it impacts the plot. I just feel like that was a super cool way to introduce right away how important sound and rhythm and just overall like the music of the movie was going to be. And I feel like whenever a movie has iconic sound, that's when a movie is going to last forever.
Yeah.
And I really hope and I think that's what's going to happen with this Dune franchise.
I also think so. I'm really excited to see how the next movie is going to kind of showcase, because I hope that they're still going to bring in those aspects of the first one in the second one. And I do think they will, because why build up all the suspense to not do it in the second one?
Yeah, let's get into that. That's kind of the final part of this Monday matinee. What are your expectations for Dune 2? Because I think I've heard from some of the early reviews by critics who luckily got to see this film early. One, it's one of the highest rated films out there right now on these platforms. Obviously, it will drop as more people get to see it.
Yeah.
But they are having huge praise for this movie. They've broken it down where in the beginning it's very much character driven again, where it's Paul and Chani, Zendaya's character. They get to work a lot more together in the beginning of this movie, and I'm very excited to see how they are able to show the Fremen people more in depth. I hope they don't shy away from the symbolism and kind of the commentary on society about these native people.
I don't think they will do that. Hopefully they won't, because I mean, based off of the first movie, they already introduced a lot of their like traditional customs. They already talked about like how important water is to them, how willing they are to sacrifice themselves for their people, and they already explain all of their like core like identifiers as a group of people. So I don't think they would just throw that all out. And on top of that, with Chani being like very like she definitely wasn't like an impactful character as much in the first one.
Yeah, people were really annoyed that Zendaya, that was one of the biggest criticisms. People were confused why Zendaya, one of the biggest castings in the movie, wasn't that big of a character. But I think the vision was that eventually there would be a part 2 to finish the story of that first book, where Chani is extremely important.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm very excited. We are going to actually be seeing Dune 2 on Thursday, 5 p.m. right here in Lincoln at our movie theater. So I'm hoping we can put out kind of an out-of-theater initial reaction, probably spoiler-free for that one. Just kind of give you
just
our...
because that's going to be opening weekend.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, you should go see the movie first before you go get spoiled. But we'll put that out. Just kind of give you a sense of our thoughts on if it's good. I think we can say beforehand it's probably going to be
It's probably going to be pretty good. I'm excited to see everything come into play, especially someone who's not familiar with the universe.
Yeah, and there's a ton of castings for other characters in the book, very important ones. Florence Pugh is playing the princess. They've cast the Emperor, and also Austin Butler is playing Fade Rautha, who is a very important character. Him and Timothée Chalamet are going to have an epic face-off in this movie. I'm very excited for you to see it as someone who this was your first time watching the first part of the movie, and now getting to see the second part and the way that this story, at least the first portion of it, concludes. I think you are set for a fun ride.
Well, I'm ready for that. I'm really excited.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for joining us on the first episode or edition of the Monday Matinee, probably releasing late Tuesday or late Monday, early Tuesday morning, as we are recording this at around 11:45 p.m.
Dang.
Yeah. So it was a late night for us, but it was really fun to start this. I'm excited to keep this channel going, and make sure you subscribe because we're going to have a bunch of movie reviews, even some vinyl vlog travels as we
just a little bit of everything.
Just kind of a little bit of everything into our personal lives, and we're excited to bring it to you guys. So thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe, leave a like, and we'll see you next time.